The Philippines is set to become the first export customer of the supersonic Brahmos cruise missile. India and Indonesia on Monday agreed to expand strategic cooperation in a range of areas including industries and technology sharing, as the two maritime neighbors looked at injecting a new momentum to their security partnership. India and Indonesia, which is also locked in a maritime dispute with China in the contentious South China Sea, have decided to expand their strategic and defense cooperation in a wide range of areas. The further expansion of defense and military relations were discussed during delegation-level talk led by Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and his Indonesian counterpart General Prabowo in New Delhi on Monday. The possible areas of further expansion of defense and military ties were discussed during talks between Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and his Indonesian counterpart General Prabowo, officials said. Responding to the possibility of the Philippines adding the missile to its inventory, the country's Department of National Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana said in December 2019 that the contract signing for the Brahmos would take place in the early or later part of 2020. The Philippines is undergoing a modernization program for its military, with 300 billion Philippine pesos $5.9 billion earmarked for the procurement of equipment between 2018 and 2022. The country faces tensions with China in the South China Sea, where it contests part of the Spratly Islands. China seized the Scarborough Shoal after a standoff in 2012, and in 2019, a Chinese ship rammed a Philippines fishing vessels. The 39,000 crore rupees order for the indigenous jet fighters will replenish the IAF's fighter fleet, restart India Inc.'s paralyzed supply chains and create a multi-tiered defense industrial ecosystem. The light combat aircraft Tejas, indigenously designed by Aircraft Development Agency under the Defense Research and Development Organization, is slowly entering squadron services. In the hype over Wednesday's arrival of the first lot of 5 French-built Rafale fighter aircraft, it was easy to lose sight of the indigenous LCA Tejas, which, after years of development delays, is slowly entering squadron services. The order for the 83 Tejas MARK-1A variants that the Air Force was to place with the public sector Hindustan Aeronautics Limited (HAL) officials told India Today. The order is likely to be confirmed before December 2020. Earlier this year, after months of negotiations, HAL and the IAF finally agreed on a price tag of 39,000 crore rupees for the 83 aircraft, 73 fighter jets and 10 two-seat trainer variants. HAL official attributed the delay to several outstanding issues, particularly a number of queries related to additional requirement through contract. All queries have now been answered and the case is under approval, a HAL official said. The next phase in the contract would be approval by the Cabinet Committee on Security (CCS), India's topmost national security decision-making body. This will be followed by a formal inking of the contract between HAL and the IAF. Delivery of the Mark-1As will start within 3 years of the contract being signed and will conclude with all aircraft delivered in 5 years. India has demonstrated it has the will and the capabilities to stand up to China, said Lisa Curtis, Deputy Assistant to President Donald Trump and Director of the U.S. National Security Council's South and Central Asia Bureau. In remarks to U.S. think tank, Brookings Institution, the senior White House official said, China's recent aggressive stance at LADAKH in Ladakh fits with the larger pattern of PRC aggression in other parts of the world. The U.S., on the other hand, supports India's rise as a power and a net security provider in the Indian Ocean and beyond. In the current India-China crisis, Curtis said, India played the economic card by banning Chinese apps and putting a hold on Chinese investment contracts. And I think the rest of the Indo-Pacific region is watching this very carefully, adding that the region would be encouraged by India's resolve. The U.S., both the Trump administration and the U.S. Congress, have openly supported India in the current crisis with China. On July 21, the U.S. House of Representatives unanimously passed an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act (NDAA), slamming China's aggression against India in Galwan Valley and its growing territorial assertiveness in and around disputed areas like the South China Sea. Amidst a global uproar against China over various issues including a military standoff with India, Beijing's ties with Moscow appears to have hit a roadblock, with the latter announcing a postponement of delivery of S-400 surface-to-air missile systems to Beijing. The S-400 air defense missile system is considered the most advanced of its kind in Russia, capable of destroying targets at a distance of up to 400 kilometers and a height of up to 30 kilometers. China received the first batch of S-400 missile in 2018, a military diplomatic source told Russia's TASS news agency, citing Chinese newspaper Sohu. UA Wire reported, this time, Russia announced the postponement of the delivery of missiles for the Chinese S-400 system. To a certain extent, we can say that it is for the sake of China. Getting a gun is not as easy as signing an invoice after receiving a weapon. They say that the work on delivering these weapons is quite complicated. While China has to send personnel for training, Russia also needs to send a lot of technical personnel to put the weapons into service, Sohu said. It appears that cracks have started to appear in relations between Beijing and Moscow relations. Recently, Russia has accused one of its leading Arctic researchers of treason, alleging that he gave sensitive information to China. China has tried to play down the development by saying that Moscow was forced to make such a decision as it is worried that the delivery of S-400 missiles at this time will affect the anti-pandemic actions of the People's Liberation Army and does not want to cause trouble to China. Watchers of Russia-China relations believe the spying allegations against an Arctic researcher could highlight a burgeoning competition between the two countries in the region. According to CNN, Russia is an important strategic and military ally of India. Last month, Defense Minister visited Russia and met with Russian leadership, who assured New Delhi that ongoing defense contracts will not just be maintained but will be executed soon. The remarks come just days after the Galwan skirmish. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, after meeting with Russia Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Ivanovich Borisov on June 23, had said that India's new defense proposals have received a positive response from the Russian side. Chinese ambassador said China was not a strategic threat to India and that the general structure that we can't live without each other remains unchanged. China on Thursday warned India against any move for forced decoupling of the two economies in the wake of the military standoff along the disputed boundary between the two nations. The communist country also cautioned New Delhi against any move to review India's One China policy and to recalibrate its approach on Taiwan, Tibet, and Hong Kong. The development of economic and trade cooperation between our two countries is determined by international division of labor. It is also the natural choice of enterprises and consumers of our two countries under the market-oriented principles, Sun Weidong, China's ambassador to India, said. The forced decoupling of the Chinese and Indian economies is against the trend and will only lead to a lose-lose outcome. He was speaking at a webinar hosted by the Institute of Chinese Studies in New Delhi. The comment by Beijing's envoy to New Delhi came even as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government is contemplating more economic measures against China, in response to the communist country's aggressive move to unilaterally alter the status quo along its disputed boundary with India. Sun said that the economies of India and China were interwoven and interdependent. According to local statistics in India, in 2018-2019, 92% of Indian computers, 82% of TVs, 80% of optical fibers, and 85% of motorcycle components are imported from China, he said, adding, countless examples like this are the reflection of globalization. Globalization has deepened the interconnection between countries into the capillaries. Whether you want it or not, the trend is difficult to reverse. Both China and India have been deeply embedded in the global industrial chain and supply chain. New Delhi on June 29 banned 59 apps linked to China, alleging that they were used in activities prejudicial to sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security of state and public order. The banned apps included TikTok and WeChat, owned respectively by ByteDance Limited and Tencent Holdings Limited of China. The government on Tuesday banned use of 47 more apps, mostly the clones and the different versions of the previously banned ones. New Delhi is also planning more economic offensives against China, with its security agencies identifying the communist country's companies, which have past or continuing links with the People's Liberation Army (PLA) and are operating in India. The companies identified so far for having links with the Chinese PLA include Alibaba Group Holding Limited, Tencent Holdings Limited, Huawei Technologies Company Limited, and the SAIC Motor Corporation Limited. The standoff between the Indian Army and the Chinese People's Liberation Army in eastern Ladakh also prompted many in India to suggest that the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government should review the country's One China policy, by elevating relations with Taiwan, by more overtly supporting Dalai Lama and the exiled Tibetans' struggle against China's rule over Tibet, by speaking up against the Xi Jinping regime's atrocities on Uyghurs in Xinjiang and crackdown on pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong, and by more strongly opposing the communist country's expansionist moves in South China Sea. Preparing for a long haul in the eastern Ladakh sector in extreme winters, the Indian Army has an edge over the Chinese as it has deployed 35,000 troops there who have already done tenures in high altitude and cold conditions. The Indian troops deployed there are mentally prepared for tackling the weather and terrain. In contrast, the Chinese troops deployed along the line of actual control (LAC) are not used to these conditions as they have been brought from mainland China and are not accustomed to high-altitude extreme cold weather conditions. We are preparing to provide extreme cold weather portable cabins for around 35,000 troops that have been deployed in the eastern Ladakh sector, government sources told ANI. Our soldiers deployed there have already done a tenure or two in Siachen, eastern Ladakh or northeast, and they are physically and mentally prepared for a longer deployment there, they said. The Chinese soldiers deployed on the Indian front include mainly conscripts who join the PLA for a period of 2 to 3 years and then return to their normal lives. Sources said Indian and Chinese troops are engaged in a standoff situation all along the LAC in eastern Ladakh from sub-sector north, with both sides having deployed around 40,000 troops against each other over there. The two sides have disengaged at 3 friction points including patrolling point 14, PP-15 and PP-17 and PP-17A. At PP-17 and 17A, the Chinese have now maintained a small element of close to 50 troops and the remaining elements have gone back into their permanent locations. The sources said the army is also not much bothered about the Chinese buildup along the LAC as it has got more than 2 additional divisions from outside Ladakh sector. India Army has more troops than what the Chinese have brought there, they said. For the winter deployment, the Army already has a sizable stock of clothes and habitat for troops as the Indian Army deploys troops at the world's highest battlefield Siachen Glacier and is prepared. For additional requirements, the force is in the process of placing orders for additional tents and shelters from indigenous as well as foreign vendors. The time for summer stocking is on and we are going to get the additional cabins and tents by that time. The sources, months of June, July, and August are considered to be the best time for stocking winter rations and ammunition. The snowfall is expected to start soon in the eastern Ladakh area where the temperature is already low. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has given financial powers of 500 crore rupees per procurement to the defence forces to address any type of shortages of weapons, ammunition, and habitat. Australia, in an unambiguous message for China on Thursday, stated that it opposed any attempts to unilaterally alter the status quo at LAC, which only serve to increase tension and the risk of instability. Australia urges restraint along the line of actual control (LAC) and supports continued moves towards de-escalation. It is important that the bilaterally agreed principles and norms that have helped prevent escalation or miscalculation in the border areas over many decades continue to be observed, Australian envoy to India Barry O'Farrell stated after meeting External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. In clear message for China, the envoy emphasized, Australia remains deeply concerned by actions in the South China Sea that are destabilizing and could provoke escalation. On 23 July, Australia lodged a note with the UN Secretary-General refuting China's unlawful maritime claims in the South China Sea. It rejects China's claim to historic rights and internal waters, its assertion of certain maritime zones, and its contention there is wide international recognition of its South China Sea sovereignty claims. The envoy further stated, "Our vision for the Indo-Pacific remains unchanged and is for an open, free, rules-based region, a region resilient to coercion and supported by inclusive global and regional institutions that promote prosperous, stable and sovereign states based on shared interest. Territorial disputes and competing claims should be resolved peacefully by the claimant countries, and in ways consistent with international law. Each country in the region has the agency to shape not just how our region emerges from COVID-19, but how we use this test to reinforce a regional order guided by agreed rules and international law."